prices of almost every commodity on the market has increased, has seen an astronomical increase. Rice, oil, milk, whatnot has increased on the market. We are here at the Kejetia and Edu market to interact with some traders, wholesalers, retail marketers, and even buyers to find out how the commodities, the increase or astronomical increase on some of these commodities is biting hard on their pockets.
Just this morning, I came to buy rice. When I returned to buy another, they said they have increased it by 50 Ghana cedis. The prices increase at least thrice in a day.
But I'm on auto the Mabusa and auto a tongue.
Yeah, the quite long journey. But over far, I say 50 bars. But to make it 30 bars. And so.
First, they said to Sikaso so come there, but they said they are Ekita Sikaso come there.
They promised to make things better. We have money, but we cannot buy anything. I have to add the cost of transportation to the items.
But they say money is 7.3. They say me quite something to go 8.3 because me in and out. And my intimate home, not yes, someone team one bonus Ghana there. I want to learn a best. You see, we are
incurring losses. We have no money now. People come here and return without buying anything because they may have budgeted for a particular amount, but when the prices are increased, they cannot buy anything.
Do you think the government is not doing enough to ensure that our commodities on the market are well priced for everybody to consume?
What I can say is now is that I can't blame the government. Like, I can't put everything on the government, but they should try their possible best to do something about it so that the prices will go down.
I have this wholesale manager to interact with him on how the prices of the commodities keep changing even within a day.
The dollar is not stable as at now. The dollar keeps increasing, and you know most of these rice that we're selling here, they are not locally made. It's imported. And then one thing I was told to is like inflation has gone high, and then duties. I think they have increased it from 11% to 20%. And if that is supposed to happen, it means the price of the commodities will also have to go up.
You rightly mentioned that you are importing some of these items from outside. Why are you not purchasing the locally made ones?
This is not the only place. You can go around different shops. You not get the locally manufactured products there. It's not in the markets. It's hard you come by them. Yeah, and then that one too, I was told it keeps increasing. Though it's manufactured locally, but the price also keeps increasing.
So we have been interacting with some buyers and marketers, and even those who retail sellers here at the PZ market right here at Doom, and they have been telling us how the prices of commodities on the market is adversely impacting their business, and they are hoping that the government can actually do something about it. Reporting from here at the PZ market in Edum, my name is Emmanuel Brightcoop.
So from the Ashanti region, Edum to be specific, we come back to Accra, but what is the pulse of all of this across different parts of the country? Let's check out some of the data we've put together for you, and then we'll come into the studio and introduce our guests. So if you look at those commodities price hike, the rising price of food items, the import value of selected food items. We're starting with pepper and other pepper products in 2023. We spent, yes, $3.8 million on that. Then you come to tomatoes and other tomato products, and of course that will shoot up, that will be higher. We import not just from the sub-region, Burkina Faso and others, but from even outside the sub-region. $36.1 million on the back of that. Put the two together, that's already what? $40 million. But then you look at the rising price of food items, and then it is the paint container. When you look at them, the pricing now, June 2023, it stood at 65 Ghana cedis. Guess what? As of June 2024, the same bit, 200 Ghana cedis. That's an increment of 135 Ghana cedis on top. Then you look at the tomatoes in a paint container. What you would have got for 75 cedis in June 2023, a year ago, is now 180 Ghana cedis, an increment of 105 Ghana cedis. If you're looking at the box, the adaka, what you would have got in January 2023 for 1,500 cedis now goes for 7,000 Ghana cedis, an increment of a whopping 5,500 Ghana cedis. In June last year, you would have got yam, a tuber of yam for 15 cedis. Now it stands at 30 cedis. That's 100% increment. So these are just a few of those we've been looking at. But joining us for a conversation in the studio, we have Dr. Theo Champong. He's an economist and political risk analyst. He joins us in the studio. Doc, it's always good to have you.
Yes, no, good to hear.
You're looking dapper. Over life, Kakra.
The economy is biting.
The economy is biting.
Yes.
It's good you stay out of town a lot. But here it is. You've seen the picture we've painted. I mean, if you look at some of these figures, it's mind-boggling. Having to buy a box of tomatoes, what you would have bought for 1,500 cedis, and now it is 7,000, an increment of 5,500. It then begins to make sense why purchasing food has become so expensive everywhere you go. But what do you make of where we are, the underlying factors, and how we even got here?
Yeah, again, good morning and pleasure to be here. And I think, yes, it's mind-boggling, but actually there's a reason for that. So let's just stick to the pepper example that you gave for 65 cedis to 200 cedis. If you actually unpack that, right, and look at the price architecture or makeup, you would find that a lot of that price increment is driven by transportation costs. And then you also have the input cost, so basically what it takes to produce the pepper, the fertilizer, and other resources that you need to grow pepper, and transport being a big chunk of that. So anytime you see, for example, petrol prices going up in our market here, and that's a function of different variables, the price on the international market, the exchange rate, and then the taxes and levies. But in our case, the biggest thing has been the exchange rate, instability. Then that cascades and affects literally any and everything within the country, including food. So you look at the inflation data the last few months, and you see that our inflation has become sticky, right?
When you say sticky, what do you mean?
So sticky meaning that we're now playing around the 23% band.
23, 25 in recent times.
Improvement compared to the 54% that we've seen. But the last couple of readings from the statistical service, and then you also look at other indicators like the PMIs, the Purchasing Managers Index. It tells a story, and the story being that the rate of disinflation, which one would have expected, has not been as fast enough as we want. So remember that by the IMF program and by the central bank's own estimate, by the end of this year, we should be doing 15% inflation. At the levels where we are currently, it might be a little bit difficult to actually meet that 15% target. And so what that basically then means is that you enter into this, what I call a catch-22 situation where inflation doesn't come down as much as you want, and that means that there's very little room for the central bank even cut, right, the policy rate. And that also then feeds into the cost of borrowing. So the same businesses that go to the banks and the commercial institutions and want to borrow to buy fertilizer or to buy fuel to grow the pepper, then still have to struggle in terms of the cost of production, and ultimately it then also makes them uncompetitive in that sense. So people then would then able to substitute that with importation. So they'll bring other products from other places, because just producing it locally just does not make any sense whatsoever in terms of the the economics of.
And you think that is affecting, for example, you realized when my colleague was interacting with some people in the Edum area, some of them were saying, he was asking, why do you have all these foreign brands? And he said, look, we can't find the local ones. Some of them are not even on the market. You think that is impacting them?
There are 1 or 2 local products, so I think we have to unpack.
Right.
There are 1 or 2 local products. I mean, for pepper, I'm sure most of it would be locally produced. But then there are others too that you struggle to find, because the people that started producing when, let's say, the exchange rate was 10 cedis, for argument's sake, now are having to struggle with an exchange rate close to what, 17, 18, and could even, further depreciate in that sense. So yes, it does have a direct consequence and an impact on the availability of certain goods and certain products on the market. There's also a question of taste and preferences that often we miss in this conversation. That of
course, which will also impact your level of inflation, your personal inflation,
the level of inflation. But I think this is where, again, I feel we have to be a bit more deliberate with a bigger push or a national campaign to actually get us to consume more of the local products that we have in here. But of course, to consume more means that it has to be competitive, right, in that sense. Other than that, for most people, or the ordinary man on the street, it comes down to the economics of it. How much do I have to spend to buy the pepper, the tomato, the toothpaste, the milk? If I go and I find an alternative on the market that is cheaper than what is coming from the local market, often people would go for that, versus the local alternative.
So looking at all of these factors that you're making mention of, yes, your taste will determine it. But nowadays, look at some of the most basic products: pepper, onions, tomatoes, rice, and the rest. These are things we do produce here to some level. But looking at the escalation in prices, yes, you've said everything that you've said, but how does it add up? Because if you look at the stark differences, 75 to 180 year on year, it's horrifying. Like, we're not even talking about fish. We're not talking about,
the other products,
chicken, eggs, stuff like that. I mean, your common our common snack around here. Look at how things have escalated. Look at sachet water.
Yes.
And where it's got to. Bottled water. And where it's got to. Is there any way of rationalizing, making sense of these developments?
Oh, like I said, I mean, everything in terms of the price markup, especially with transport. But also remember, even those products that we're importing, the duties are a big issue, right, at the port. So most of the duties are benchmarked in dollars, isn't it? And then you pay more or less the CD equivalent, right? So if I bring my piece of chicken at the port, for argument's sake, and then I have to, again, pay more CDs, than I was paying a year ago, of course, I will pass it on to the consumer, in addition to my price markup that
exactly.
You do. Now, I've heard
no businessman or woman wants to do business to incur losses.
Yes,
everybody wants to make a profit.
I've heard people also make the argument that maybe the businessmen are cheating us a little bit, because if you actually work down the cost architecture plus all of these duties at the port, even if you did that, the prices that we're seeing on the screen here shouldn't maybe be 75. It shouldn't be 180, but something lower than that. I don't have any empirical data to ascertain that. But what I do know is that anytime you have the price increment, either at the port because of the duties and the exchange rates and the cost of transport and all of that, it feeds directly into the cost of living and inflation expectations. So you look at the statistical service data, the last reading we had for inflation in April, and I think in the next few days they're going to release the reading for May, right? And you can see that if you break the year-on-year inflation figures down, so April was about 25%, food inflation 26.8%, and then non-food inflation 23.5%. And you can track the series, go back a couple of data points, and you still have this persistent issue of food inflation being a major
it's a major driver,
major issue.
Fuel,
and not
fuel
just
also, you know, a lot of the time transport.
Disaggregate it and look at the regions. Some regions are even feeling it more than you know, in Accra. And the absurdity, you may argue, of all of it is that in some of the regions where you've got a lot of land to grow food and to produce the local alternatives, those are the places where people actually are struggling to buy food, right?
And there's an interesting picture. I mean, there's a comment that comes through here, and I understand it in a certain way. He says, Masa, Lawrence Gate says, Masa, there is nothing cheap nowadays, whether local or foreign. So you see, the local person also producing, let's say, the tomatoes. We are not importing this one. We are not bringing it in from Burkina Faso. It's not some variety of whatever. We are producing it right here.
Yes.
Right? The cost of fertilizer.
Yes.
The cost of tilling the land.
Yes.
The cost of labor. The cost of the other bits that may be dollar indexed with CD equivalent and all of that means that even for the local person producing and maybe even looking at the harvest losses, poor roads, and all of that, when it feeds in, the local bit may even end up being more expensive than. So whether you go local or foreign, we're faced with the same slaps.
Yeah, same set of issues like I explained. But there's also one other thing where, for example, in your Burkina Faso and other places, they got a big issue of mechanization at scale, right? And then there's a lot of government support in terms of incentives to the farmers, whether they are cooperatives or individual farmers or big commercial scale agriculture, to actually produce for the local market and export. You get the idea. So they're able to do that and bring down the unit cost, and ultimately the rest is what is shipped for us. I was driving on the Nima highway yesterday, and in the middle lane, I saw an advert where they're basically selling or advertising chicken. And the chicken is actually coming from Brazil, right? And then I was asking myself, you know, have we sunk this low?
Yeah.
Right? That is not to say that...
From the Akoko Dakos, the Dako farms, and all those...
Trade is good. You make something somebody buys and sells and all that. But ordinarily, something like chicken should be something that actually we should be able to produce, right? And mass and mechanize.
We should also be able to produce toothpicks.
Yes.
But we are importing toothpicks.
Bicycle spokes. Right.
Yeah, the spokes in the wheel.
On the wheels, and that's because again, it's the business environment has been constraining, and like we're saying, no businessman would be able to produce competitively if your cost of borrowing at the bank is well in excess of 30%.
Exactly.
Whereas
in some cases close to 40%.
The guy in Brazil doing that same chicken may be getting it below 10%, right? Yeah. All things being equal. So you can again look at there's a piece of report that the Statistical Service put out. The title is the Ghana 2023 Mid-Year Trade Report. And then it highlights different elements of, intra-African and then, other trade. But you look at our top 10 food exports, and mostly what we are sending out is cocoa beans, cashew nuts, cocoa paste, cocoa butter, some tuna, some shea, more cocoa, mangoes, and palm oil and other things. Now, you look at our imports, right? And then it says we are importing cereal grains, yeah? We are importing, number 2, frozen cuts and offal of fowl, so chicken, yeah? We're importing palm oil and its fractions. We're importing guts.
Can you imagine that we're importing palm oil? Can you imagine that?
And stomach of animals.
So the intestines, the other parts.
And then all of that. You've got fish, frozen fish, and then you also have palm kernel, and then a couple of other things that are in there. I think that we can produce these things here at scale and in volume. What you've got to do that is then comes down to a question of incentives and a question of the business environment.
But we have, even as you talk about incentives and the business environment, just feed into this. Incentives, business environment. We have planting for food and jobs, rearing for food and jobs. We have 1D, 1F. Why have we not been able to plug these holes?
You can do all of that. The numbers shows for those ones that some of the production volumes have gone up, but you still have a huge demand. And even if you produced a lot of plantain or cassava under 1D, 1F, and you're not able to move it from the farm to the place where it's needed because the road is bad, because there's no cold chain storage solution, because the guy who's even trying to produce has to buy fertilizer at 3 times the price and all of that, right? You can have the policy, it'd be beautiful on paper, but it wouldn't have a major dent in terms of bringing down, right, your food inflation. Much less then fits into the overall inflation level and gives the central bank the room to cut policy to bring down the cost of business. That's the missing link that sometimes I think a lot of people also forget, that in all of this inflation, cost of living conversation, it's become, you know, you're caught in a whirlwind. But we know that if you address one, it has a cascading impact on, you know, other sectors of the economy.
Mm. Well, this definitely is a major issue that we're going to have to deal with. How do we get out of this? I know it's not going to be like you know, one jab and you're out of this. I know, but how do we, in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term, how do we get out of the grips of this menace we find ourselves in?
I think we've got to think more medium to long term. And in fact, I can point you to documents. You know, we are good in this country at producing beautiful pieces of paper, right? Documents addressing similar issues as far back as the 1960s and 70s and 80s, right? But we've not been able to sustain the implementation of these, you know, reforms for one reason or the other. For me, I think it comes down to large-scale mechanized agriculture. Agriculture as a serious business that we do. There's room for subsistence farming. But even when I worked in, you guys were talking about cocoa, right? If you take cocoa industry as an example, most of the farmers, the productivity levels are very, very low. On average, the cocoa farmer is producing 9 to 10 bags, right? Harvesting that per year. In other places, and that translates to about 400 kilograms per hectare. In other places, people are doing well in excess of 1,000 kilograms per hectare, so almost twice the output level. So there's an issue of productivity that we've got to address. And that, I think, can largely be done through large-scale mechanized, you know, agriculture. But it's also then the ability to give certain incentives, you know, tax waivers to encourage the production. We've been giving tax exemptions for all manner of weird, dodgy things in this country. We've got to put our priorities, you know, right. And I think if we do, together with, you know, the other interventions, it could even help address the issue of the youth unemployment that we're talking about. I'll use myself as an example. I was discussing this with some friends and my wife. I'm looking forward to getting into agriculture. Mm. Right? Yeah, I'd love to.
Please take me along.
Some scanning around.
I want to get into.
I want to produce tomatoes, right? Grow tomatoes.
Okay.
Grow peppers.
Which variety are you looking at?
I don't know the variety.
Okay,
yet.
You have to get into that first.
No, but the whole idea is to do it on a big mechanized scale. So you have like large greenhouses that you're growing tomatoes.
Irrigation.
It's not just one season, but you've got drip feed agriculture, a much more scientific approach to doing it. Right. So every maybe 4 months or so, you're actually harvesting tomatoes, and then you've got the value chain. So you have some little cars, you've got the storage that can then move your tomatoes or peppers from your cold, chilled warehouse to the supermarket and the markets that need it. Other than that, we'll be here in 10 years' time, we'll still be talking about this same thing because everything is dependent on the rain. And once the rains go out, so in August this year or September, you enter the food bumper season. There'll be some food around. And then we all go and sleep. You know, it's like the proverbial, grasshopper, right? Yeah. It says that,
tomorrow,
during the summer, I can eat and sleep and all of that. Forget about winter.
While the ants are storing.
Exactly, right? And the good book says what? If you want to be wise, go and
observe the ant.
From the ways of the ant. I think that's what we've got to do.
Interesting thoughts. That's a powerful way of ending the conversation. But Ghana Forward, this is where we are. Cost of living. I mean, I look at some of the things and I'm thinking, wow, is this where we are now? But we can only hope, pray, and work for better times. Well, we also have a visit to the Malata market. Our colleague Semefa was there. We'll bring you some footage on that as we cap off this conversation.
Sake na 1,002. Nanka ye ton 700. And last week we buy 800. This week almost 1,002. 1,002. Transportation my kaya yo my. Nti say wo kan nyina agwo na che say 1,003. Ye fa no kotoku. Ana se do benase. Nti sa na eti nti say nanka rubber ni 50 cedis. So say 60.
The sack of onions used to be 700 cedis. Just this week, it is 1,200 cedis. I think this is due to the transportation cost and the depreciation of the cedi against the dollar.
Nigeria dey no fam kakra chen Nigeria no. Them say dollars no so kan obi na ama ne nyina so no akọ high no.
Madrid konkoni we ni 20. Ketwa na 10. They say 100 cedis. Because no bonus. We are 40, we are 60. Emma Green. Kokona ne boy edin. Me to be because me will say ne boy.
I don't buy much because of the prices. The amount of money that can be used to buy the sack of pepper a few months ago can only purchase half a sack today.
Basket no. Wait, your basket be a yellow blue basket. Emma. And no son no. I must say 11 million. Until 11 million me tobacco na machim na matumbi and the chia na masatu said e be anya meka
rubber near 150 and I weigh near 80 weigh 50 weigh 30 once in so na turn to s and tamani boyede na vrongo nuko if tan bakunu so or the two important.
I wish we could add value to the Ghanaian tomatoes because the ones from outside the country sell faster. That is the cause of the cedi depreciation.
But towns can be black, come up be man, so now, wow, man, so now, yes, it can work from the Besa, is it can be black or Geo Mudeno. So a man boy
pepper to whatever. And we can't make it. We're just struggling to buy little for the house. Before I come to the market to buy once a month. And now I can't. Every 3 days, every week itself I can't. So we hope for the best when the rain stops.
How does it affect the quantity of food that you prepare for the family?
It's unfortunate. Family of two. It affects it though because if I like a gravy. Because I don't like canned tomatoes. I like the fresh tomatoes. So it's affecting me well. So we have to reduce the size we eat, we take, and the size we buy to squeeze ourselves to see whether it will last for us.
When I bought our vegetables, I cut them, so tomato, onions. I was just asking her. I think they found a nice way of selling to you without you realizing it. So instead of increasing the prices, they reduce the quantity and they're taking you the same thing. So I think it's one of their strategies of making sure that people don't complain. But definitely we will know the difference. I mean, if I come and the quantity has reduced, I would definitely know. So I was asking her about why the numbers. They used to give me so many fingers. Now it's just a few of them. Yeah.
Welcome back, and that is how we cap off this bit of the conversation on the cost of living. And of course, the one who joined me, Dr. Theo A. Champong, an economist and political risk analyst. Doc, thank you so much.
Pleasure.